Hey there, little adventurers. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, we're going on a sweet and funny adventure with Whiskers, the fluffiest cat around. Whiskers has discovered something amazing, and we're going to find out what happens when curiosity gets the best of him. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, so you never miss an adventure. Whiskers wasn't like the other cats in the neighborhood. While they spent their days lounging lazily on soft cushions, batting lazily at string toys, and getting distracted by the occasional sunbeam, Whiskers was always looking for something more. He had a mind full of big, curious ideas, like why humans like to throw balls at walls and call it fetch, or why they always seemed so obsessed with shiny things called phones. But there was one thing that truly captured Whiskers' attention: ice cream. For weeks, he had watched his humans, Mom and Dad, sitting together, eating something cold and creamy out of tiny bowls. They would make delightful noises like, "This is so good," and "I love this flavor." And each time they enjoyed this mysterious treat, Whiskers would stare at them, tail twitching. "What is that deliciousness?" he wondered. "And why is it always out of my reach?" He had to try it. He had to know. So he made a vow to himself: one day, he would taste this magical food. That very day had come, one warm afternoon, after Whiskers had spent hours chasing a piece of string that was clearly escaping from him. He felt the air shift. A sweet, familiar smell wafted through the house. He stopped, nose twitching, ears perking up. Was it? Could it be? He patted carefully into the kitchen, where the scent was strongest, and there it was, the bowl of ice cream. The bowl of magic. Sitting on the counter, gleaming with a soft, frosty glow. Whiskers' eyes widened in amazement. The creamy swirl of vanilla topped with a perfect, shiny cherry was everything he'd ever imagined. He took a cautious step forward. "It's finally real," he whispered to himself. "It's mine." He stared at the bowl for a moment, wondering how he could reach it. It wasn't on the floor, like the food he was used to. It was high up, perched on the counter like a treasure just waiting to be claimed. Whiskers took a moment to assess the situation. His eyes darted from the counter to the chair next to it. If he could just get up on that chair, he could jump to the counter. It seemed simple enough. He'd seen his humans do it many times. But he had never tried it himself. "No problem," Whiskers thought, with a determination that only a cat could muster. He jumped up onto the chair. It wobbled beneath him. "Whoa, steady there," Whiskers muttered, his tail flicking nervously. He steadied himself and turned to face the next obstacle, the big jump to the counter. The bowl of ice cream seemed so far away. But Whiskers was nothing if not a cat with confidence. He crouched low, wiggled his behind, and prepared for the leap. This was going to be spectacular. He took a deep breath and launched himself into the air. And missed. With a dramatic thud, Whiskers landed straight into the flour jar. The jar tipped over, spilling flour everywhere. The kitchen was immediately covered in a white, powdery mess. Whiskers stood frozen, covered in flour, and looked at himself. He was an absolute disaster. "Great," he muttered. "Now I'm a snowball." Whiskers shook the flour off his fur as best as he could, but his mission wasn't over. The ice cream was still sitting on the counter, waiting to be devoured. He could taste it in his dreams, cool, creamy, and oh so delicious. He decided to give it another shot. This time, he'd be careful. With his fur slightly powdered, Whiskers eyed the chair again. He wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. He jumped up onto it, gracefully this time, and then, with all the determination in his little body, he sprang to the counter. Success. His paws landed with a soft thud on the counter. Whiskers looked around, breathing a sigh of relief. The ice cream was right in front of him. But then, a disaster. The cherry on top of the bowl started rolling. It teetered on the edge of the bowl, then wobbled dangerously. Whiskers panicked. If the cherry fell, the whole ice cream would be ruined. He reached out with his paw, trying to stop it from falling. But instead, he knocked the entire bowl over. The ice cream flew into the air, and the cherry, rolled under the fridge. Whiskers stared at the mess on the floor. There was ice cream everywhere. The sweet, creamy goodness was now splattered all over the kitchen. And the cherry, his prize, was out of reach. Whiskers froze as he heard footsteps approaching. It was Mom. "Uh-oh," he whispered, eyes wide with horror. This was it. His big moment was going to end in disaster. Mom stepped into the kitchen and took one look at the mess. Ice cream was everywhere. The floor, The counter, and even the walls had been splattered. The once beautiful bowl lay shattered on the ground. And Whiskers, of course, was right in the middle of it all, his fur now covered in sticky ice cream. "What happened here?" Mom asked, raising an eyebrow. Whiskers did the only thing he could think of. He gave his best innocent face. He tried to look like he was completely unaware of what had happened. "Meow?" he asked in his most innocent voice, as if to say, "Who, me?" Mom couldn't help but chuckle. "You are one mischievous little cat, aren't you?" She shook her head but smiled. "You know, I think you're too cute to stay mad at for long." Mom took a deep breath and began cleaning up the mess. "Well, I guess we have to clean this up now, don't we?" Whiskers squirmed as she tried to wipe the ice cream off his fur with a warm cloth. He hated baths, and this wasn't any better. His fur was all sticky, and he smelled like vanilla. It was the worst thing that could possibly happen to a cat, being clean and smelling like dessert. "Why do humans think this is fun?" he thought, grumbling as he was carefully wiped down. Whiskers' tail flicked back and forth in annoyance, but he knew deep down that his chances of getting more ice cream were quickly slipping away. It was a disaster. But he also knew that no adventure was ever without its hurdles. The next day, Whiskers was feeling like a cat on a mission. He wasn't going to let his previous failure define him. He could do this. He would get his ice cream, no matter what. Whiskers watched patiently as Mom and Dad prepared their usual dessert. He was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As soon as they turned their backs, he leaped to the counter and claimed his prize. As Mom and Dad talked, distracted by their dessert plans, Whiskers made his move. He quietly hopped onto the chair and then, with the precision of a tiny acrobat, leapt onto the counter. There it was, the ice cream, just like before. But this time, he had learned. No flour. No mess. He licked his paw and gave a tiny taste of the vanilla ice cream. He purred in delight. "This is it. This is everything I've dreamed of." Just as Whiskers finished his tiny taste, he heard a voice behind him. "Whiskers?" Mom was standing in the doorway, looking at him with a raised eyebrow. "What are you doing?" Whiskers froze, paw halfway to his mouth. He knew the game was up. He looked up at her with wide, pleading eyes, his little face as innocent as possible. "Meow?" he asked, as if to say, "I'm just tasting it?" To his surprise, Mom laughed. She walked over, scooped up a little bit of ice cream into a small bowl, and placed it in front of him. "Well, I guess you've earned it after all." Whiskers purred, thrilled. This time, he didn't need to cause a mess to get what he wanted. He'd learned that sometimes, patience and good behavior could bring rewards. From then on, Whiskers would sit patiently, watching his humans enjoy their ice cream. He knew he could always ask for a little taste, and every now and then, Mom would give him just enough to enjoy. He no longer needed to cause trouble. He had learned that some things in life were best enjoyed slowly, with a bit of patience. And every time he got his little bowl of ice cream, Whiskers would smile, knowing that the best adventures were often the ones you least expected. Wow! What an adventure! Whiskers sure learned a lot about patience and sharing. If you enjoyed his ice cream adventure, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more fun stories. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss an adventure. See you next time, and keep being curious and awesome.